A hyper-realistic photo of a young, attractive woman with a full round face, soft, delicate features, subtle natural makeup, expressive eyes, shoulder-length, slightly wavy hair. Upper body portrait with both hands visible in a relaxed, natural pose. Wearing a stylish, modern blouse, elegant yet understated, photographed against a plain white background. Studio lighting, cinematic detail, photorealistic rendering. R23. My name is Emma Walsh, and on that Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m., I watched my professional life get executed in front of 347 witnesses. The Zoom gallery stretched across my monitor like a digital coliseum, each tiny square holding a face I'd worked with for 5 years. Some looked away, others leaned closer to their cameras, hungry for the spectacle. The brave ones typed furiously in the chat, their messages cascading down the sidebar like digital blood drops. "Emma, can you please turn on your camera?" Michael Grayson's voice oozed through my headphones, syrupy with false concern. Our CTO, the man who'd built his reputation on my code, wanted to see my face as he destroyed me. I clicked the camera icon. Let them see. Let them all see the woman who'd saved this company's infrastructure more times than anyone could count, sitting in her home office, about to be discarded like obsolete hardware. "As you all know," Michael began, his perfectly lit face filling the main screen, "we've had to make some difficult decisions regarding our engineering team's direction. After careful consideration, we've determined that Emma's role is no longer aligned with our strategic vision." Strategic vision? I almost laughed. The man who couldn't write a simple sorting algorithm without Stack Overflow was talking about strategic vision. The Slack notifications exploded on my second monitor. Shock emojis, question marks, private messages asking if I was okay. Derek from Backend wrote, "This is bullshit," before quickly deleting it. Sarah from QA sent a single broken heart, but most just watched, silent, grateful it wasn't them. "Emma has been a contributor to our team," Michael continued, pausing just long enough for everyone to hear what he didn't say. "However, recent performance reviews and concerns about team dynamics have led us to this decision." Performance reviews, team dynamics, corporate speak for she wouldn't stay quiet about my incompetence anymore. I kept my face neutral, the same expression I'd perfected during 5 years of watching him take credit for my work. But something must have shone in my eyes because I saw a few people shift uncomfortably in their little squares. Tom from DevOps actually shuddered. "We wish Emma the best in her future endeavors," Michael said, his smile sharp as broken code. "Of course, she'll be bound by her non-compete agreement, which I'm sure she'll honor as the professional she claims to be." Claims to be. There it was, the final insult, delivered with surgical precision to maximize humiliation. "Emma, would you like to say anything?" He asked it like he was offering me a last meal. 347 faces waited. The chat had gone silent. Even the usual keyboard clatter in the background had stopped. I leaned forward slightly, just enough for the camera to catch the movement. My hand slipped into my laptop bag beside the desk, fingers closing around the USB drive I'd prepared weeks ago when I'd seen this coming. They didn't know about the late nights I'd spent documenting everything. They didn't know about the module I'd written before I'd even signed their contract, the one that now powered 40% of their platform. "No," I said, my voice steady as clean code. "I have nothing to say." I clicked leave meeting before Michael could respond, before HR could jump in with their prepared statement about security protocols and returning company property. The screen went black, reflecting my face back at me. My phone buzzed immediately. Texts, calls, LinkedIn messages. I ignored them all, pulling the USB drive from my bag and setting it on the desk. Such a small thing, barely bigger than my thumb. But it held 5 years of evidence, every commit, every design document, every proof that Michael Grayson was a fraud who'd built his kingdom on stolen code. Outside my window, San Francisco carried on like nothing had happened. The city didn't care that Emma Walsh had just been professionally executed, but it would care soon enough, because public executions work both ways, and Michael had just made a fatal error. He'd given me nothing left to lose. The truth about Michael Grayson was something only a handful of us knew, and we'd all been too afraid or too smart to say it out loud. But sitting in my apartment at 2:15 p.m., unemployment fresh as a new wound, I finally let myself catalog every moment of his incompetence I'd covered up. There was the database migration of 2021, when he'd nearly corrupted 3 years of customer data with a single misplaced command. I'd caught it at 11:45 p.m. on a Friday, spent the entire weekend rebuilding the indexes while he was at a tech conference taking credit for our team's latest deployment. He'd never even known how close he'd come to destroying the company. Or the time he'd insisted on implementing his own revolutionary caching solution, which turned out to be a memory leak so severe it crashed our servers every 6 hours. I'd rewritten it from scratch, let him present it as his breakthrough innovation to the board, even got him a $40,000 bonus for optimization excellence. The non-compete agreement sat on my coffee table, 12 pages of legal chains designed to bury me, 1-year prohibition from working in any capacity related to cloud infrastructure, distributed systems, or enterprise software development. In Silicon Valley, that meant everything. It meant starvation. Michael had smiled when HR had slid it across the table 3 years ago. "Standard procedure," he'd said. "Everyone signs it." What he didn't say was that he'd personally revised mine, made it broader, more vicious than anyone else's. I'd found that out later from Janet in legal, after too many drinks at a company happy hour. My laptop chimed. Another email from HR, this time with a spreadsheet attached. Company property audit. Response required within 24 hours. They wanted every commit ID, every line of code I'd ever touched, every document I'd created. 5 years of my life, itemized for deletion. I opened our internal GitLab in an incognito window, using credentials I wasn't supposed to have anymore, but it wouldn't revoke for another hour. My name was already disappearing. Commits reattributed to Michael or listed as team contribution. The architectural diagrams I'd spent weeks perfecting now showed M. Grayson as the sole author. Even the wiki pages I'd written to help onboard new engineers had been scrubbed of my existence. They weren't just firing me, they were erasing me. The rage came then, pure and clean as optimized code. Not hot anger, but the cold kind that makes you methodical, the kind that helps you think 10 steps ahead. I pulled up the non-compete again, reading each clause with fresh eyes. Employee agrees not to engage in any business that competes directly or indirectly with company's core offerings. But what if the company's core offerings were built on something that was never theirs to begin with? My phone rang, Michael's personal number. I let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker. "Emma, I want you to know this wasn't personal." His voice had lost its public performance quality. Now it was just tired, maybe even slightly afraid. "You're brilliant, but you never learned to play the game. Too rigid, too principled. This industry requires flexibility, and you..." A pause. "Just honor the non-compete, and everyone moves on clean. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Too principled, too rigid." Translation: I wouldn't let him commit code directly to production without review. I'd questioned his optimizations in front of other engineers. I'd suggested, politely, that maybe we should test his brilliant ideas before deploying them to 30 million users. I deleted the voicemail and opened a new browser tab. The California State Legislature website loaded slowly, like it was still running on infrastructure from the 90s. But there it was, buried in the recent session notes, SB 699 set to take effect January 1st. Complete prohibition of non-compete agreements in California. Retroactive and immediate. 3 months away? Michael thought he'd checkmate me with a 1-year non-compete, but he'd never been good at chess. Never understood that sometimes the best move is not to move at all. To wait. To let your opponent think they've won while you quietly position your pieces. I closed the laptop and picked up the USB drive again. Everything I needed was here. The original module I'd written as a freelance project before joining the company. The emails where Michael had asked me to just integrate it for now. We'll handle the licensing later. The Git history showing how that module had become the foundation for everything they'd built since. He'd stolen my code. Now he was trying to steal my future. But Michael Grayson had made one crucial error. The same one that plagued every piece of code he'd ever written. He'd failed to consider edge cases. And I was about to become the edge case that brought down his entire system. David Latner's office didn't look like a typical Silicon Valley law firm. No glass walls, no minimalist furniture, No abstract art that cost more than most people's salaries. Just floor-to-ceiling law books, a desk older than most startups, and a man who'd been destroying corporate bullies since before the first dot-com boom. They made you sign this. He held my non-compete agreement between two fingers like it was contaminated. This isn't just restrictive, Ms. Walsh. This is vindictive. It was 3:30 p.m. on a Thursday, 1 week after my public execution. I'd found David through a former colleague who'd whispered his name like a secret weapon. He doesn't advertise, she'd said. Doesn't need to. Can you break it? I asked. David smiled, the kind of smile that probably terrified corporate lawyers across the Bay Area. Break it, no. That's thinking too small. He pulled out a legal pad, yellow and ancient. Tell me about this code you wrote before joining them. I laid out everything. The distributed caching module I'd developed as a side project in grad school, how I'd open-sourced it initially, then pulled it down when I realized its potential. The emails from Michael begging me to just let them use it temporarily when their system was failing during a critical demo. And you have documentation of all this. I handed him the USB drive. Every commit, every email, every Slack message where he promised they'd work out the details later. David plugged it into an air-gapped laptop, scrolling through files with the focus of a code reviewer. This module, it's essential to their platform. Remove it, and their entire infrastructure collapses. Response time would go from milliseconds to minutes. The platform would be unusable. And they never formally licensed it from you. Michael kept saying legal would handle it. Then after I was hired, he said it was covered under my employment agreement, but I pulled out another document. My employment agreement specifically excludes pre-existing intellectual property. David leaned back, fingers steepled. They're using your property without permission, claiming it as theirs, and simultaneously preventing you from using your own creation. That's not just breach of contract, Ms. Walsh, that's theft. He stood, walked to a whiteboard that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 90s, started writing dates, drawing timelines. Here's what most people don't understand about non-competes, he said, marking January 1st with a red circle. SB 699 doesn't just ban future non-competes, it retroactively voids existing ones. Every single one in California becomes toilet paper at midnight, December 31st. But that's 3 months away. I can't wait. You won't just wait, he turned, marker still in hand. You'll prepare. If you move now, they'll get an injunction, tie you up in court for months. But if we time this right, he drew an arrow from January 1st to a point several weeks later. We hit them when the law is crystal clear, when they have no legal ground to stand on. I stared at the timeline. And in the meantime, you do nothing that violates the current agreement. You don't work for competitors. You don't start a company in the same space. He paused. Officially. David's smile widened. Did you know that Delaware allows anonymous LLC formation? That consulting agreements can be structured through multiple legal entities, that developing educational materials and research projects falls outside most non-compete definitions. He pulled out a business card, slid it across the desk. My former partner, Rebecca Martinez. She specializes in corporate structure, very creative, very discreet. I picked up the card. This is legal. Everything you'll do will be perfectly legal. You're not going to violate a single clause of that non-compete. You're going to honor it to the letter while building something that will make Michael Grayson wish he'd never learned to code. He went back to the whiteboard, adding more notes. 3 phases. First, we establish your ownership of the pre-existing IP. Second, we wait for the law to change. Third, he wrote 3 words in capital letters. Make them prove. Make them prove what? Everything. Make them prove the code is theirs. Make them prove you violated anything. Make them prove they have any right to your work, your ideas, your future. He capped the marker. By the time we're done, they'll be begging to settle. I stared at those 3 words. Such a simple strategy, but elegant, like clean code. Don't attack. Don't defend. Just make them prove their lies in court, where documentation matters and Michael's charm would be worthless. How much will this cost? I asked. David returned to his desk, pulled out a contract. My standard rate is $600 an hour. For you. I'll work on contingency. 30% of whatever we recover. Nothing if we lose. Why? Because I've been waiting 5 years for someone to hand me ammunition against Michael Grayson. He pushed the contract toward me. Your former CTO has a history. Ms. Walsh, you're not his first victim, but you're going to be his last. I signed without hesitation. As the ink dried, I felt something shift, like a program finally compiling after hours of debugging. One more thing, David said, pulling out a fresh legal pad. Start a journal. Write down everything, every memory of Michael's incompetence, every lie he told, every piece of code he stole. Date everything. Be specific. He handed me the pad and a pen. Your memory is evidence now. I took the pad, wrote 3 words on the first page. Make them prove. Underneath, I added the date and my first entry. Today, I began my silence. The birth certificate of my revenge read, Elaine Rowe Consulting, LLC. Registered in Delaware on a rainy October morning through 3 layers of legal separation. Rebecca Martinez had structured it beautifully, a ghost company that existed everywhere and nowhere, perfectly legal, completely untraceable to Emma Walsh. Your new identity, she'd said, handing me the paperwork at 7:15 a.m. in a coffee shop nobody from tech would ever visit. Elaine Rowe doesn't work in enterprise software. She develops educational materials. She conducts research. She consults on theoretical system architectures. Theoretical, the word that would save me from the non-compete while I built something very real. My apartment had transformed into a command center. 3 monitors, all bought with cash, all registered to Elaine Rowe. No LinkedIn profile, no Twitter presence, no GitHub account that could be traced back. In Silicon Valley, I'd become a ghost. But ghosts can still recruit. Devin answered on the second ring when I called from a burner phone at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. Emma, Jesus, I heard what happened. That was so fucked. Don't say my name, I interrupted. And don't say anything specific. Can you meet me tomorrow, Pier 39 by the Sea Lions? Noon? He was there at 11:58, looking over his shoulder like he was in a spy movie. Devin had been my first intern, fresh out of boot camp, terrified of breaking production. I'd spent hours teaching him, protecting him from Michael's rage when he made mistakes. Now he was a senior engineer, underpaid and overworked, maintaining code he knew was stolen. I can't be seen with you, he said, not looking at me as we stood watching the tourists. Michael made it clear. Anyone who contacts you is gone. I'm not asking you to be seen with anyone. I'm asking if you'd be interested in a side project, educational, research-focused, completely unrelated to my former employer's space. Devin glanced at me. Educational. Teaching materials about theoretical infrastructure, how systems could be built better, faster, more efficiently, purely academic. He was smart enough to understand. And this educational project, it would need engineers. 2 or 3. People who understand the importance of clean code. People who can keep quiet. Kara, he said immediately. And maybe Robin from the platform team. They're both... He stopped. They're both furious about what happened to you. Kara had been another of my protégés. A brilliant woman Michael had tried to push out until I'd intervened. Robin had watched Michael take credit for their optimization algorithm that saved the company $2 million a year. Can you reach out carefully? Devin nodded. Educational project. Got it. We met a week later at 2 a.m. in a 24-hour diner in Oakland, far from any tech hub. 4 of us in a back booth, speaking in code like the resistance we were. The core issue with existing platforms, I said, spreading out hand-drawn diagrams, is that they're built on stolen foundations. What if we could teach people to build something better? Kara studied the designs. This architecture, it's similar to nothing that currently exists. I cut her off. This is purely theoretical, a teaching tool. Robin pulled out their laptop. I've been working on something similar, for my portfolio, personal learning. They showed us a caching algorithm that was 10 times more efficient than anything in production. Been developing it on weekends, my own time, my own equipment. If someone were to combine these theoretical components, Devin said slowly, they'd have something that could handle millions of requests per second with half the infrastructure. Theoretically, I emphasized. Of course, Kara smiled. All theoretical. We established the rules that night. No company equipment, no company time. Every line of code written on personal machines. Committed to private repositories hosted on servers registered to Elaine Rowe Consulting. We'd communicate through encrypted channels. Meet only in person. Leave no digital trail that could be subpoenaed. What about money? Robin asked. Theoretical or not, servers cost real cash. I'd liquidated my emergency fund, sold my Tesla, moved to a studio apartment in the Sunset. Elaine Rowe has funding for educational materials, enough for 6 months of research. And after 6 months? After 6 months, the legal landscape changes, and our theoretical platform becomes something else entirely. Devin raised his coffee mug. To education. To research, Kara added. To theoretical systems, Robin smiled. I raised my water glass. To patience. We worked in perfect silence for the next 2 months. Devin built the back end in Rust, faster and safer than anything Michael could comprehend. Kara crafted APIs that were poetry in JSON. Robin optimized until our theoretical system could run on a laptop what competitors needed server farms to process. And I orchestrated it all as Elaine Rowe, a ghost in the machine, building our weapon in plain sight while remaining completely invisible. Every commit tagged as educational, every feature documented as research purposes only, every breakthrough labeled as theoretical implementation. Michael thought he'd exiled me from the kingdom of code. He didn't realize I was building a better kingdom, one line at a time, in the shadows he'd forced me into. By December 1st, we had a working prototype, not a product. That would violate the non-compete. Just an educational demonstration of what was theoretically possible when you built systems correctly from the ground up. Theoretically, it was perfect. Practically, it was ready to destroy everything Michael had built on stolen foundations. The whispers started in early December, spreading through Stack Overflow threads and Reddit discussions. Like a virus Michael's security team couldn't patch. Nobody knew where they originated. Devin had been careful with his alt accounts. Kara had used VPNs through VPNs. Robin had posted from coffee shops across the city. Anyone else notice CloudFrame's response times degrading? There's a theoretical architecture paper floating around that makes their whole system look prehistoric. My friend saw a demo of something that processes the same load with 70% less infrastructure. I watched from my studio apartment as the tech community began to turn. Michael had built his reputation on being cutting edge, but whispers have a way of cutting deeper than press releases. The blog post went live at 3 a.m. on December 15th, published on an anonymous Medium account called Systems Theorist. The title was innocuous, Fundamental Flaws in Modern Cloud Architecture, a Case Study. It never mentioned CloudFrame by name. It didn't have to. Every vulnerability, every shortcut, every piece of technical debt Michael had accumulated over 5 years was laid bare in devastating technical detail. The authentication bypass he'd refused to fix because it would slow down his precious demo, the memory leak in the core service that consumed resources like a cancer, the hard-coded credentials he'd insisted on for debugging purposes. But the killing blow was the dependency analysis. A careful reader could see that the entire system relied on a single module, a caching layer that, if removed, would cause cascading failures throughout the platform. My module? The one they'd stolen. Within 6 hours, it had been shared 4,000 times. Hacker News crashed it to the front page. Security researchers started probing, finding every vulnerability the post had hinted at. CloudFrame's status page began lighting up yellow, then orange, then red as Michael's team scrambled to patch holes they'd ignored for years. I got a text from a blocked number at 9:45 a.m. I know this is you. I didn't respond. Elaine Rowe didn't have a phone. The venture capital community moves on gossip and fear, and by December 20th, both were in abundant supply. Tommy Rodriguez from Andreessen Horowitz was overheard at Blue Bottle saying CloudFrame was technically bankrupt. Sarah Kim from Sequoia had reportedly pulled out of the Series C round. The term sheet that Michael had been parading around the office was suddenly under review. But the real beauty was the customer emails, forwarded to me by allies still on the inside. Fortune 500 CTOs asking pointed questions about the architectural issues. Security teams demanding audit reports. Compliance officers questioning whether CloudFrame could meet SLA requirements with such fundamental flaws. Michael's response was predictable. A all-hands meeting at 2 p.m. on December 21st, mandatory attendance, cameras on. There's been some malicious disinformation spreading about our platform, he announced, his face red even through the Zoom filter. Likely from a disgruntled former employee who violated their NDA and non-compete agreements. The chat stayed silent. Nobody posted emojis, nobody typed support. They all knew the technical analysis was accurate. I want to be clear, Michael continued, his voice cracking slightly. Our architecture is solid. These are theoretical vulnerabilities that don't exist in production. That's when DevOps posted in the public channel, then why are we down? The main production server had crashed at 2:14 p.m., right as Michael was denying the problems. The timing was coincidental. Robin swore they had nothing to do with it, but the irony was perfect. 4 hours of downtime, 3 major customers threatening to leave, 2 board members calling emergency meetings, and 1 CTO losing his mind in real time on the company Slack, typing in all caps about finding the traitor who was sabotaging them. I documented everything from my anonymous accounts, screenshots, timestamps, public statements that contradicted each other. David Latner was building a beautiful collection of evidence showing Michael's incompetence and instability. On December 23rd, an anonymous GitHub account published something extraordinary, a complete technical specification for a new platform architecture. Not code, that would be too dangerous, but blueprints, diagrams, performance benchmarks from theoretical testing. It showed what could be built if someone started fresh, without the technical debt, without the stolen code, without Michael's shortcuts. It was everything CloudFrame claimed to be, but wasn't: clean, efficient, scalable, and most importantly, built on original work. The tech bloggers went wild. Is this the CloudFrame killer? Asked TechCrunch. Anonymous architect exposes industry's technical debt crisis, wrote the information. Michael called me directly on Christmas Eve, from his personal cell to mine. I let it ring, then listened to the voicemail. Emma, I know it's you. Stop this now, or I'll bury you in legal fees. You're violating your non-compete, your NDA, everything. You think you're clever, but I have lawyers who eat clever for breakfast. You have 1 week to stop, or I'm coming after everything you have. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to David with a note. He sounds scared. David's response was immediate. He should be. 7 more days until your chains disappear. 7 days until January 1st. 7 days until SB 699 took effect. 7 days until I could stop being a ghost and become the reckoning Michael had earned. The theoretical had done its job. The whispers had become roars. The foundation was cracking. Soon, it would be time to make them prove that any of it was ever theirs to begin with. The cease and desist letter arrived at CloudFrame's headquarters at 9:05 a.m. on January 2nd, delivered by a courier who made sure to get Michael's signature personally. David Latner had crafted it like a precision missile, every word chosen to detonate on impact. Unauthorized use of pre-existing intellectual property owned by Emma Walsh. I wasn't there to see Michael's face when he read it, but Devin was. He texted me from the bathroom. He went white, then red, then started screaming for legal. The letter was a masterpiece of legal devastation. It laid out, in excruciating detail, how CloudFrame's entire caching layer was built on my pre-existing work. Every function, every algorithm, every optimization I developed before joining the company. David had attached 90 pages of evidence Git commits from my personal repositories, dated 2 years before my employment. The original copyright registration I'd filed. Emails where Michael explicitly acknowledged the code was mine. But the real knife twist was the demand. Cease all use of the disputed code within 72 hours or face immediate legal action for intellectual property theft. 72 hours to remove the heart of their platform. Michael called an emergency board meeting at 1 p.m. I knew because 3 different insiders texted me variations of "shit is hitting the fan." The conference room's glass walls might as well have been a fishbowl as the entire office watched Michael pace, gesticulate, and gradually deflate as the board members' faces grew stonier. By 3 p.m., CloudFrame's legal team had arrived en masse. Morrison and Hartley, the firm that had crushed dozens of startups for daring to challenge their clients. 5 lawyers in identical suits, carrying identical briefcases, wearing identical expressions of corporate menace. Their response came at 6:45 p.m. Ms. Walsh's claims are without merit. The code in question was developed as work for hire under her employment agreement. David had anticipated this. We'd spent hours preparing for this exact argument, documenting every instance where Michael had acknowledged my prior ownership. The smoking gun was a Slack message Michael had sent to the VP of Engineering. Emma's bringing her caching module with her. It'll save us 6 months of development. But we needed more. We needed to prove that without my module, CloudFrame would collapse. Time for phase 2, David said when I called him that evening. We demonstrate the dependency. The demonstration came in the form of a technical analysis posted on January 3rd by a respected security researcher who went by White Hat 0x. Neither David nor I knew their real identity. They'd reached out through encrypted channels after seeing the December blog post, but their reputation was unimpeachable. The analysis was titled, Single Point of Failure, a Deep Dive into CloudFrame's Architecture. It included a dependency graph that looked like a spider web with my module at the center. Remove it, and the web collapsed. Every service, every API, every customer-facing feature relied on that stolen core. White Hat 0x had even included a proof of concept. If this module were to be replaced with standard caching, response times would increase by 4,000%. The platform would be unusable. CloudFrame's stock price, already shaky from December's revelations, dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Michael tried to go on the offensive. A press release at 8 a.m. on January 4th, claiming disgruntled former employee attempting extortion, a leaked memo to TechCrunch about my history of insubordination, even a pathetic attempt to paint me as a difficult woman in tech who couldn't handle criticism. But David had prepared for this, too. We released my performance reviews, 5 years of exceeds expectations, glowing peer feedback, documented innovations that had saved the company millions. We also released something else metrics showing that every major platform improvement in the past 5 years had come from commits with my signature. The killing blow came from an unexpected source, Janet from Legal. The one who'd warned me about my non-compete over drinks had kept copies of everything. She'd watched Michael doctor documents, backdate agreements, falsify records. On January 5th, she walked into David's office with a banker's box of evidence and a signed affidavit. He tried to get me to forge an assignment agreement, she told David while I listened on speaker. Wanted me to create a document showing Emma had transferred all rights to her code upon hiring. I refused. He said he'd handle it himself. David's voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. And did he? He created a forgery. I have the original metadata. The document he filed with the court was created December 28th, not 3 years ago like he claims. Forgery, fraud, intellectual property theft. The charges were stacking up like memory leaks in Michael's code. At 4:15 p.m. on January 5th, CloudFrame's board called another emergency meeting. This time, Michael wasn't invited. The next morning, January 6th, a new cease and desist letter arrived. But this one was different. This one came from CloudFrame's board to Michael Grayson, informing him that his services were no longer required, effective immediately, pending a full investigation into intellectual property fraud. They offered me a settlement that afternoon, $2 million and a full transfer of my code rights back to me. David told them to double it and include a public apology. They agreed within an hour. But I wasn't done. The module they'd built everything on, the one they now had to license from me, I set the price at $5 per API call. CloudFrame processes about 10 million API calls per day. You do the math. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Superior Court of California, County of San Francisco, Department 302, January 15th, 9 a.m. sharp. Michael sat at the defendant's table with his new legal team. He'd had to hire them personally since CloudFrame's lawyers now represented the company against him. I sat beside David, wearing the same blazer I'd worn to my first day at CloudFrame. Poetic justice has a dress code. Judge Patricia Tanaka looked over her glasses at the assembled lawyers. This is a hearing on the plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction and the defendant's countersuit for violation of non-compete agreement. Mr. Grayson, your counsel may proceed. Michael's lawyer, a sweating man named Brendan Price, stood up. Your Honor, Ms. Walsh has deliberately sabotaged my client's business through a coordinated campaign of— Counsel, Judge Tanaka interrupted. I've read your brief. Do you have any actual evidence that Ms. Walsh violated her non-compete agreement? Price shuffled papers. The timing of the anonymous blog posts. Anonymous, so no proof they came from Ms. Walsh. The technical knowledge demonstrated could only have come from anyone with expertise in cloud architecture. Next argument. Price's voice cracked slightly. She formed a competing company, Elaine Rowe Consulting. David stood. Your Honor, if I may, Elaine Rowe Consulting was formed as an educational content company. It has no products, no customers, no revenue. It exists solely to produce theoretical architectural frameworks for academic purposes. That's a shell game, Michael burst out, standing up despite his lawyer's desperate grab at his sleeve. She's been building a competing platform. Judge Tanaka's gavel came down once. Mr. Grayson, you'll remain silent unless addressed directly. David continued smoothly. Furthermore, Your Honor, even if my client had violated the non-compete, which she categorically has not, that agreement became null and void on January 1st when SB 699 took effect. This was the moment. Price tried one last desperate play. Your Honor, the violation occurred before January 1st. The law isn't retroactive to past violations. David smiled. It was the same smile he'd worn when he'd explained this trap to me months ago. Your Honor, we agree completely. If there had been any violation before January 1st, it would stand. However, Mr. Grayson has provided zero evidence of any violation. He's asking this court to punish my client for activities that, even if they had occurred, which they did not, are now perfectly legal. But the damage, Price started, was caused by Mr. Grayson's technical incompetence and intellectual property theft, not by my client. David pulled out a folder. Speaking of which, we'd like to address the countersuit. For the next 40 minutes, David methodically destroyed Michael's world, the forged documents, the stolen code, the deleted Git history, Janet's affidavit, the original copyright registrations, the emails acknowledging my prior ownership. Michael's face went through phases like a failing deployment confidence, confusion, panic, error. Your Honor, David concluded, not only did Ms. Walsh never violate her non-compete, but Mr. Grayson systematically stole her intellectual property, attempted to destroy her career, and then forged documents to cover his theft. We request immediate relief and full damages. Judge Tanaka looked at Price. Counsel, do you have any response to these allegations of forgery? Price looked at Michael, then back at the judge. We request a recess to consult with our client. Denied. I've seen enough. Judge Tanaka removed her glasses. Mr. Grayson, please stand. Michael stood slowly, like his code trying to process with insufficient memory. In my 20 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such a clear case of corporate theft combined with such vindictive personal malice. You stole Ms. Walsh's work, claimed it as your own, built a company on it, then tried to destroy her career when she became inconvenient. She turned to me. Ms. Walsh, the court finds entirely in your favor. The non-compete agreement is void. You are free to work wherever you choose, create whatever you wish, compete however you see fit. Then, back to Michael. Mr. Grayson, you are ordered to pay damages in the amount of $4 million for intellectual property theft, plus punitive damages of $1 million for the forgery and attempted fraud. Additionally, you are barred from any role in any technology company for a period of 3 years. The gavel came down with finality. Michael's legs gave out. He sank into his chair, staring at nothing. His lawyer whispered urgently about appeals, but we all knew it was over. As we packed up our documents, Michael called out, his voice broken. Emma, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around. Why, he asked. I gave you a job. I gave you opportunities. Now I turned. The courtroom was nearly empty, just us and the bailiff. You gave me nothing, I said quietly. I gave you everything. My code, my ideas, my silence when you took credit, and when I finally stood up for myself, you tried to destroy me. I could have made you rich. The IPO was built on stolen code. Your empire was always going to fall. Michael, I just made sure I was the one holding the detonator. I walked out of the courtroom at 11:47 a.m., David beside me, leaving Michael alone with the ruins of his arrogance. In the hallway, Devin, Kara, and Robin were waiting. They'd taken the morning off to witness the verdict. So, Devin asked, what now? I pulled out my phone, opened a new repository on GitHub. Public this time. No more hiding. Now, I said, typing in the repo name Phoenix. We build it right. The non-compete was dead. Michael was finished. And I had $4 million in damages to fund a startup that would do what CloudFrame had promised but never delivered. This time, with our names on every commit. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, a real office this time, not a stolen conference room or a studio apartment, but a proper space in Soma with windows that actually opened. It was 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I was reviewing the latest metrics while sipping coffee that didn't taste like betrayal. Phoenix Technologies had 42 employees. We'd closed our Series A at a valuation that made my CloudFrame equity look like pocket change. Our platform handled twice CloudFrame's traffic with half the infrastructure cost. But the sweetest metric was the one I checked every morning: CloudFrame's licensing payments to my personal account. $5 per API call. They'd tried to negotiate, tried to find alternatives, tried to rebuild from scratch. But removing my module was like performing a heart transplant on a patient made entirely of hearts. Everything depended on it. 10 million API calls per day, $50 million per day. They'd lasted exactly 6 days before agreeing to a bulk license, $20 million per year for unlimited usage. Every year, forever. Michael's name had become a cautionary tale in Silicon Valley. The CTO who destroyed his own company through theft and ego. He'd tried to get hired at 3 different startups, but Janet's affidavit had somehow found its way to every recruiter in the Bay Area. Last I heard, he was teaching Introduction to JavaScript at a community college in Fresno. The students complained he spent more time talking about his glory days than actually teaching code. CloudFrame still existed. Technically, they'd IPO'd as planned, but at a third of the expected valuation, the new CTO's first all-hands message had been a public apology for past technical decisions and ethical failures. They'd hired a team of 20 engineers just to maintain compatibility with my module. Their Glassdoor reviews read like horror stories. Devin knocked on my door. Team stand up in 5. Also, that reporter from TechCrunch is here. The one doing the story on toxic tech leadership. Yeah, she wants to know if you'll go on record about Michael. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No, my silence was my weapon. It stays that way. The truth was, I didn't need to say anything. The industry knew. Every engineer who'd ever had their code stolen, every developer who'd been forced out by an incompetent manager, every person who'd been told they were too rigid for refusing to compromise their principles, they all knew exactly what had happened. At 10 a.m., I got a notification from our monitoring system. A new customer had just migrated to Phoenix, bringing 3 million daily active users with them. I recognized the company name, one of CloudFrame's original flagship clients. My phone buzzed, a text from David Latner. CloudFrame's board just called. They want to discuss strategic alternatives to the licensing agreement. Should I tell them your consulting rate? I texted back, tell them Elaine Rowe Consulting is available. $5,000 per hour. Minimum 40 hours. 3 dots appeared. Then, you're evil. I'll send the contract. I wasn't evil. I was precise. There's a difference. At noon, the team gathered for our weekly culture meeting. No mandatory cameras, no public humiliation, no stolen credit. Just 42 people building something real, something honest, something that would last because it was built on solid foundations, both technical and ethical. Before we start, I said, looking around the room, I want to be clear about something. Every line of code you write here belongs to you. Your ideas are your ideas. Your contributions will be recognized. And if you ever feel like that's not happening, my door is open. Kara raised her hand. What if someone tries to pull a Michael? Then they'll learn what happens when you steal from people who know how to document everything. I smiled. But that won't happen here. We're building this right. Remember. Robin pulled up our architecture diagram on the main screen. Clean, modular, every component properly attributed to its creator. No stolen code, no technical debt, no hidden dependencies, just elegant solutions to complex problems. Speaking of building, they said, the new caching layer is ready for review. It's 30% faster than, they paused, grinning, than certain other implementations. The room laughed. We all knew which implementation they meant. I looked around at my team. People who'd risked their careers to stand with me, who'd built in darkness when the light seemed impossible, who'd proved that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just silence, patience, and code that speaks for itself. My computer chimed. Another licensing payment from CloudFrame had just hit my account. $20 million, right on schedule. I minimized the notification and pulled up our product roadmap. We had work to do, real work, honest work. And this time, everyone would know exactly who built it. The empire Michael had built on stolen foundations was paying rent to live in my shadow. Every API call, every transaction, every user interaction, they all whispered the same truth: you can steal code, but you can't steal competence. You can sign non-competes, but you can't compete with excellence. You can erase names from commits, but you can't erase the knowledge of who really built what. I opened a new terminal window and started typing. Not revenge code this time, just good, clean code. The kind that would outlast all of us. The kind they'd have to pay for forever. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop a comment, and let's connect. If this story of justice in Silicon Valley resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Have you ever faced a similar situation at work? How did you handle it? Your stories matter too.